I have a friend, we've been friends many years, and I think his technical title at his job is Executive VP. And if I mention the company that he worked for, everybody here would know it. But it's a cool story actually. He started off literally as the copy boy, the mail boy, over 40 years ago in this company. Now he's the Executive VP. So he literally worked his way up completely. And he told me recently something I thought was really interesting. When he was just starting out in this company, he went to his superiors and told them how they could save money. And they all looked at him and they completely ignored everything he said because he was a nobody, right? They're like, whatever, right? And he did the math on this and he told me, Ben, if they had listened to what I told them, they would save upward of $5 to $6 million a year. But they wouldn't listen. He calls that confronting the hippo. Confronting the hippo. And I said, what do you mean the hippo? And he said, the highest paid person's opinion. You ever known somebody like that? They're like the sacred cow at the job. So nobody wants to confront them. Nobody wants to be honest with them. Or if they are honest with them, they'll pay for it later and the person won't listen, i.e. the $5 to $6 million a year. I'd rather pay $6 million than listen is what it comes down to. John Paul II says something I think is very apropos for pretty much every human being. He says that listening is a tremendous act of love. It's a tremendous act of love. I mean, if we think about it, there's 8 billion people on the planet. Not a single one of them doesn't want to be listened to, whether you are running a corporate boardroom, running a family, or teaching. Everybody wants to be listened to. At least fake it, right? Like you're listening. It's really a great act of love. I mean, I can tell you for what it's worth, I've met with thousands and thousands of families doing family counseling. Okay? As I often say, I'm not an authority on anything except creme brulee. Okay? That one I'm an authority on. But one of the things that I have seen, the thread that runs through all of those problems is somehow traced back to poor communication in some way, shape, or form. And the root of poor communication, whether we're talking about in our workplace or in our home, is usually poor listening. It's a beautiful act of love to be a good listener. If I can just humbly make a suggestion to you, whatever occupation you're in, I can guarantee you're going to get better if you're a better listener, period. I mean, that's how it is. I love to talk, and I got a big mouth, but 75% of what I do as a priest is not talking, it's listening. Can you imagine if somebody came to counseling with a priest, and the whole time I was staring at my phone, or looking at the clock, or checking the news? Jesus talks a lot about listening. In Matthew chapter 18, he says, look, if you have a problem with someone, go to the person. He's like, go to the person. But many of us will hold it in and just grumble about the person or gossip about the person. He says, go to the person. Oh, and by the way, here's a side note. If you go to the person that you have a problem with, begin with the end in mind. Begin with the end in mind. What does that mean? It means we need to know before we have that hard conversation how the conversation needs to go, what do I need to say, and what will I definitely not say. So if the other person starts launching grenades across the bow, well, you're not perfect. I know what you did. Well, I'm not perfect. I agree. But nonetheless, this is what the behavior I see, and this can't continue. Those of you that have had to fire people at work or let them go, you know what I'm talking about. You go into these conversations, they're hard conversations. But we have to know where this conversation's not going to go and what I need to say. And when people come to us, it is a great act of love to listen to what we need to hear. But people have an amazing capacity to filter out the truth that people are trying to bring to them. These are intelligent people that will filter out the voices, and usually they're filtering out the voices of the people that they're used to listening to, i.e. their family. You know, I used to work with, I've shared with many of you that I was the chef at a local bakery here for years. My sous chef was actually a far better chef than me. She should have had the job. She's much better than I am. And one day the oven broke. And when you're running a bake shop, that's a big problem because it shuts down everything. So we called the oven repairman who came. And so she goes over to him. He walks in the door. She's a woman. She goes over to him and explains to him over 5 minutes what she thought the problem was with the oven. He didn't hear one word she said. He was like, yeah. Just ignored her. She explained the problem. He walks away. He comes right over to me and he says, "Chef, what do you think the problem is?" Blatant sexism. So I looked at him and I said one word: out. Get out. By the way, when he left, she took the oven apart, fixed the problem, and put it back together in half an hour. And I said, "I sit at the feet of the master." It's amazing, incredible. Just wouldn't hear it. People filter out things they don't want to hear. Can I just give us maybe some tips to become a better listener? Number one, avoid distractions. Phone off, iWatch off, PlayStation off, TV off, laptop off. Full attention. Ask questions, even if they're telling you something you could care less about. Love means that we have an interest in what interests the other person, even if it doesn't interest us. Gentlemen, I'm curious, how many of us here became a coach because your kid needed a coach, but you don't know anything about what you're coaching? It's like 5 minutes before the game and you're reading the playbook, page 35, right? I mean, we don't have an interest in this. Maybe my kid loves lacrosse and chess, but I know nothing about lacrosse and chess. But I'm going to develop an interest in it because it makes them happy. That's love. Tell me about that. Can I make a humble suggestion to all of us? Please, when the other person is talking, do not interrupt. Do not interrupt. Even if you know what they're going to say and how they're going to say it, because you hear it 100 times a day. Tell me about that. Like it's the first time you heard it. And it's for all of us. This is love. You know, I'll close with this. At NASA, does anybody remember in January of 1986 when the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded? Does anybody remember this? I remember watching this, Dan Rather talking about this. Remember the teacher, Krista McCullough, who died there? Remember that? That was 1986. Fast forward to 2003. The Space Shuttle Columbia also exploded. Both those space shuttles, that's 14 astronauts that gave their life for this country. So after 2003, NASA ordered this complete overhaul and review. What is the problem? What's the problem? So of course they discovered it was the faulty O-rings that caused the first explosion, and it was this engineering flaw and that engineering flaw. But what they discovered was very, very telling. They said the major flaw in NASA at the time was not engineering. That was part of it. The bigger problem underneath the water, the iceberg, the people at the top level wouldn't listen to the ones at the bottom level. It was the hippo effect. Because if I say something, I'm going to be fired. And these type A people don't want to hear about it. You just go back to where you work. They fixed it. Thanks be to God, now it's much better. This is where I'm going with all of this, brothers and sisters. We don't want to be like the hippo that won't take advice. We don't want to be like the oven repairman who won't listen. And we don't want to be like the NASA executive that won't listen. Well, how do we do that? We be humble and listen when people are trying to bring things to our attention, keeping in mind that we cannot listen to other people until we have listened to God first. And that requires, again, humility.